All right, we should be good.
All right, cool.
What's up, Harrison?
Nothing much. Seth, what's up, man? How you doing?
Pretty good. So
What are we here to talk about today?
we're here to talk about the Way of Zen, which I have right here. We both read recently. I actually read this months ago. I finished this in July, and you just finished it
Yes,
today.
yes. So I read it very recently, today primarily, and I was supposed to get it done a lot earlier, but I, was a little self.
That's fine. It got done.
It got done. Still got the job done.
Yeah.
But
So your memory on it and thoughts on it though are a lot fresher than mine are, I'm assuming.
mhm.
I've like I said, finished it months ago, and I've had a few conversations about it. So my thoughts aren't as raw, I guess, as yours are on this.
Yeah, mine are they're a little scatterbrained right now. Well, it's just a lot to go through, to be honest. It's a lot to talk. It's a lot to kind of like try and take in all at once. So I guess we should just dive right into it.
Yeah. Well, let's get into what it is, who wrote it, I guess, and why we wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
So first thing is, who wrote it? My man, Alan Watts.
Dude.
The man on the TV screen behind me right here.
The one and only.
Yeah, really. Who I got into Alan Watts, I would say, primarily my sophomore year here. So I was living in a dorm still, and I'm pretty sure I just sort of happened upon his lectures on YouTube.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't know, Alan Watts was he's popular for sort of popularizing Eastern culture and philosophy into the Western world.
Yeah.
So primarily Zen and Buddhism. He made it really popular, and he has a lot of really good lectures.
He does a really good job of like bridging the two topics together.
Yeah, the two mindsets, really.
Yeah, really, honestly, they're not topics. They're the two columns on which like humanity kind of stands on.
Yeah.
Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy. Like you can't get much more of a dichotomy than right then and there.
Yeah.
Which is a great emphasis on like what Eastern philosophy is kind of all about. That duality.
Yeah. Well, the lack of the duality, really.
That's on.
Which we'll get into later, but yeah, so I came across him sophomore year here, which would have been 2 years ago, and I just happened upon some of his lectures on YouTube, and I fell in love immediately.
Yeah.
Like I would fall asleep listening to his stuff. I would do homework listening to his stuff. I mean, I was just captivated with Alan Watts, and I mean, can you blame anybody? Like his voice alone is incredible.
Yeah.
But he talks so eloquently and does an incredible job of, if you know nothing on a topic, or if you don't understand a certain concept or idea, he would be brilliantly at explaining that for anybody to understand.
Yeah, he does a phenomenal job at elevating your level of understanding to like right where it needs to be in order to grasp the topic that he's talking about.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I haven't listened to a whole lot of his lectures, but I mean, I first got into Alan Watts like through a song.
Really?
Yeah, it was like an EDM song.
That just took a sample.
Yeah, of a speech of him talking about dreams and like the dream state and like what it is we really dream about. And then he just kind of it's pretty.
So do you remember? Do you remember the game Everything? Came out on PS4, PC, but pretty much the concept of the game was you were you could play as everything. You could play as anything. You could play as the grass. You could play as animals. You could play as planets, bugs, bacteria, whatever. And the movements and animation looked ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like if you were playing as a bear, you'd like be flipping head to toe to move, I guess.
Yeah, it was very odd.
Yeah, it was. But anyways,
the E3 demo was interesting.
Yeah. But one of the marketing trailers, it was like 10 minutes long, and they had an Alan Watts lecture dubbed over it. And that's what really got me interested in the game. And even more interested in Alan Watts. And then I realized that the entire game was dubbed over by Alan Watts stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
What?
As far as I know. I haven't actually played the full game, but I do. Sorry, that's it's my mini fridge.
Oh, your mini fridge. All right.
Yeah, it fucking it. So the back is what freezes, and it builds up ice.
Yeah.
And then the ice just gets too heavy and breaks off sometimes, and that's
okay.
what you're hearing.
Okay,
Right
I'm
yeah.
just hearing like a crackling noise and like is
Yeah,
there
it's
like
a mini fridge.
some like wires I should be afraid of or something?
No. But anyways, yeah. So the game is dubbed over by Alan Watts, and it's pretty incredible. Just the trailer alone is really something to listen to. The pairing of the visuals they show, even though the animations are super goofy, with the Alan Watts dub is mind-blowing. And speaking of wires, though, I was in my room and I have this desk lamp that broke maybe like a year ago, and I've just kept it around. It doesn't work, but I took it apart the other week to try and see if I can get it to work.
Yeah.
And the so coming up the stem of the lamp is the wire, and then it splits off in the head of the lamp to the ground and the hot.
Yeah.
And I was on the phone with my dad because he used to be an electrician, and trying to figure out how to fix the lamp. And the ground was still connected where it should be, but the hot wasn't. And so I was messing with that wire with my dad on the phone, and I accidentally touched the hot wire to where the ground was connected, and there was a huge fucking spark from the lamp, and all the lights and electronics just went out. Boom.
In the entire house?
Yeah.
What?
I tripped all the breakers.
Oh my gosh.
And my hand was like black.
Singed?
No, it wasn't burned.
No
or anything.
burning?
It was just black.
Wow.
From the spark. Yeah.
Dang.
And so my dad made fun of me a little bit for doing that, but I came down here and turned on the breakers, and it was fine. I trashed the lamp.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah. Imagine you probably like fused the wires or something. Just destroyed it. Yeah. Yeah. I don't like messing with electricity, to be honest.
It can be dangerous for sure, but not to sidetrack us. But.
Now I'm just thinking about a time when I was working at Lowe's and I was like setting up a trailer and had to connect a battery. Went to go connect that battery and shot a bunch of sparks everywhere.
Did you mix up where?
Yeah. Actually, I had them both connected, and I don't know. What was I doing? Oh, I had the wrench and I was tightening down the bolt on the positive end. And then that like the metal wrench touched like the metal frame of the tractor.
Oh.
And it, made ground and then just started shooting sparks everywhere. And the dude was like, "You all right?" I'm like, "Yeah,
yeah,
I'm good."
Just walked away.
Yeah, it's like 5 minutes before I could feel my right hand again.
Yeah.
No big deal.
So Alan Watts.
Alan Watts, great guy. Highly recommend looking him up and listening to him because he will blow your mind.
And so, like we said, he was really popular for popularizing or mainstreaming Eastern thought into Western society. And one of his pieces of work that did that was The Way of Zen, which is his sort of introductory and general overview of Zen, what Zen is, its history in the East, and that.
Really his overall is I would say, well, I'm not gonna say it, but the back of the book says that it's like one of the best introductory books you can read, trying to understand Eastern philosophy and Eastern thought.
Yeah,
it does a great job. It starts out with like it's an interesting way of breaking it up because it doesn't really talk about the practice of Zen or Buddhism really until the second half of the book. The first half of the book is really talking about like the founding principles of Zen, which is really just a different denomination, if you would, of Buddhism. And so it kind of starts out with like the Tao, which was interesting. I had no idea what Taoism or Taoism was. And it just being like the understanding of like, that's when it's talking about the grasp fist and then what it is when it becomes ungrasped.
What happens to your fist when you open your hand?
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what
exactly.
It is. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think one of the big things about it is he's not necessarily trying to convince you of Zen per se. He's not trying to talk you into subscribing to something. He's just informing you on something that he might believe or that he is passionate about.
Really, he's trying to just inform you on a very interesting and confusing and foreign topic to just about anyone.
To most Western minds.
Most Western
and he
minds,
freely admits that.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the beginning of the book, he says multiple times, this is something that's hard to grasp for the Western mind. Specifically, the very scientific, fact-oriented Western mind, where we like to categorize things and where we like to say, okay, this is this, that is that. These things don't mix. This is the opposite of that. Yeah. This can never happen because of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it is because of that. We are the reason that it is that, pretty much. It is a poster of Kurt Cobain because I say it is a poster of Kurt Cobain. It is a mixture because I say it is a mixture. And really, I think where that's the main divergent point in Eastern and Western philosophy that Alan Watts is trying to bridge is we think of things as matter and it having an actual
specific form.
Yeah, exactly. And Eastern thought never really went that path. They just gave it.
At least the Zen did, because correct me if I'm wrong. Like I said, it's been a while, but Confucianism was sort of the opposite of Zen, right? Was it Confucianism?
So Confucianism was really just
because that was where it was very orderly. It gave a lot of value to the societal rules.
Yeah, so the best way I could kind of describe Zen and it not be off, I guess, would just be you still have, when you're practicing Zen Buddhism, it's not that you're in an elevated state of mind or that because you are Zen you are enlightened or anything. You still have to do the everyday, day-to-day work that needs to be done. And it actually even talks about, and that's where Confucianism comes in. Confucianism is the groundwork of the day-to-day, the waking up and feeding the ox.
It's what keeps you functioning in society.
Exactly.
He even talks about how Confucianism was beneficial for the young man who has to make a way for himself in society.
Yep.
Who has to, provide for family and for himself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Zen, on the opposite, was beneficial for the old man who has sort of is able at least to remove himself from society a little bit to where he's not bound by those rules.
Yeah, both of them almost seemed like they benefit from having one another. They're not dependent of one another, but they definitely benefit. So with Confucianism, like you're saying, that the early life, it gives the rigid structure needed, I think, for young people to get stuff done that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Because that they're the torchbearers of society, and so I think that's what Confucianism kind of tries to get across. And then with Zen, exactly what you're saying, it allows for the people who have already done the work, already kind of their time has passed. They have to make peace with what they've done. And try not to grasp onto the past because it's already gone,
Right. Yeah. And So going into it, like you were saying, you didn't have much of an idea of what those things were. You had heard of them, Taoism and everything, but you didn't have a solid.
I had a lot of assumptions. Exactly. I had a lot of assumptions going in.
I was the same way. Obviously, I had heard of Buddhism. Obviously, I'd heard of all these things. And me, I had thought.
Well, we're Western thinkers. I think what it is we hear one thing and we're just oh yeah, I know this.
Yeah, I categorized it based off everything that I have heard in the past. I categorized it in a way that was very incorrect.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So like even with reincarnation. So let's get back to the reason I bought this book. So I bought this book. I was with my ex-girlfriend, who at the time was very into Buddhism and stuff like that, and we read a book fair at the library, and this was when I was just starting to collect a bunch of books, like stockpile stuff.
Yeah.
And I
remember those days.
Yep.
I was there.
I blind bought that, one because I knew who Alan Watts was and I love Alan Watts, and two, my ex-girlfriend was into this stuff, so I was like, all right, this is cool. Grabbed it, didn't read it for forever, but that whole time I had made assumptions about Buddhism based off conversations with her, based off popular culture, based off a lot of stuff that were really wrong. And one of the things being the traditional Buddhism view of reincarnation.
Yes.
Which, from my assumption, was the literal belief in rebirth, meaning that, you die in this life, in this physical body, and your soul, your essence is actually reborn into another body.
Yeah.
Which, according to the Way of Zen, is not the traditional view of reincarnation. It's more of a representational view of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, which isn't so much literal and physical, but it's more metaphorical in the sense of grasping for something, wanting something, not being able to get that thing, grasping for something else, wanting something, not being able to get it, the cycle of karma, essentially.
Yeah. I was the same way. Like, I thought I definitely knew Buddha. Oh, whoops. Oh, that's going to be great in the audio. I was the same way though. Like with Buddhism, I definitely thought I knew everything about it. I was like, well, when they die, they get reincarnated, and I had a very basic understanding. I was like, they get reincarnated as like a bird or some shit. I don't know. Like, like,
exactly.
That's just what it is. And then I started reading it, and then it talks about like samsara, and then nirvana being the release of samsara. So essentially getting out of the cycle. The cycle of life and death, and then constantly repeating. And then take it a step further, and then Buddhism kind of goes into the subsections of it, talk about how each moment is an individual like life, or an individual like instance, and so there is nothing before, there's nothing after. That is only the abstraction that we've put on this moment to better define the moment. So therefore
to better define ourselves as well, because we
use that as a defining situation. We use that moment as a defining point. We attach meaning and we attach importance to that moment, and say it is important because it affects me this way.
And we
that's that grasping.
Exactly. We form our identity on what we have attributed to be important in the past, what events, what characteristics of our past selves are important to us now, and then also our aspirations for the future. Those two things combined make up who we believe we are. And so if you're holding on so tightly to past achievements, past characteristics, past events, past loves, whatever, and then you're not going to have a true or you're never going to know who you truly are, because those things, like you were saying, are just an abstract memory.
It was you at one point in the past, but the thing, like what he was kind of just trying to get you out of, or the whole point of Buddhism is like get out of that mindset. That was you at one point. You are now a completely different person
that no longer exists.
That is
because that time no longer exists.
Exactly.
At all.
Yeah. That is just that time is gone and past. Don't worry about it. and then that is the that reincarnation. Every moment is another reincarnation. I'm a reincarnation of my former self an hour whenever I came here, before I got here. So, and that is, the that never-ending cycle, that every minute is another start of another cycle, pretty much. It's like, holy cow. That was something that kind of took me back, where I was like, they're thinking you live and die of every second of every day.
Yeah.
And that's where you grow, and that's how you get out of this samsara, is to literally view it as such. But then,
well, just view it as, instead of viewing it as, distinct cut out moments, like, you were 8, you were 9, you were 10, you're 21 now, whatever.
Yeah,
it's just a continuum. Like, one of the biggest things that I got from it is that every way that we have of communicating are just abstractions that might do a very good job of it, but nevertheless fail to perfectly represent a reality.
Yes.
And time in itself is one of those abstractions. So even viewing your life, viewing moments as this second or last year or whatever, are viewing the world through abstractions, which is not, according to Zen, is not the correct way.
Yeah, it's not really the way to do it, because like Zen, the whole premise of Zen is to be spontaneous and to have that spontaneity in it, almost like a kid. And like where a kid just says whatever comes into their mind. And there was a really interesting part in the book talking about the like a kid's first words are like ta and da and things like that. And
I thought that was kind of a stretch for
I thought it was a little bit of a stretch, but it's also still really interesting, because like the Sanskrit word for that is tat, which is tat, I guess, or something like that. And so I thought it was really interesting that spontaneous, that I think of the way I phrased it was like, that is the surrendering of description by words and allowing reality to describe itself to the bearer.
Well,
yes. So saying that, I let you see reality and interpret it the way you would interpret it, and not taint it, pretty much.
Instead of saying, look at that beautiful snow-covered tree over there, you just point
that.
And that was a big, I guess, technique that Zen masters used to teach, I guess, their students, was the direct answering. Or I forgot what the term he used was, but
it was something around the lines of like direct answering, pretty much, or like answer without words. It was essentially just
whatever comes to you at that moment, fully embrace it and carry that out.
Yeah.
Don't think about the answer. Just whatever hits you right there, whether it be, just screaming out something that makes no sense, dancing, pointing to something, taking a pot and putting it on your head, whatever it be, just do that.
Yeah, I agree. So I think we're getting pretty close to that break, right?
We can take a break now. We'll be back in a second, but it'll be cut anyway, so it doesn't matter to you guys at all.
We'll handle this like professionals.
See you in 1 second.
What's going on?
Oh, dude, nothing much. How are you doing, Zach?
I'm doing great.
Do you know we are live?
Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Seeing us live. Actually, it's probably not live, because
it's most definitely not live.
It won't be.
No, it won't be
live.
It is
live right now.
Yeah, it's live right now for me and you.
Right.
So this kind of goes back into the whole spontaneous actions that should be taken. So did you know? Did you know, like during like their like trainings and stuff like that, the masters would literally just like, I'll play the master, and then you play the student.
It's good.
Ask me a question.
What's your favorite color?
Ha. Do another one.
What's your birthday?
the weeping willow out in the front yard. They would just answer with random questions, like the first things that came to their mind. And it was a really interesting, like, it is such a juxtaposition to how we're taught as like Western thought believers, you know what I mean?
So do you think every question should be interrupted and answered with a nonsensical question?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
this is, I think we're seeing a movement in America right now of nonsensical answers to every question. And I think we're going in the right direction.
Ooh. True. That's a good point. I didn't think about that. Because like they
in today's climate,
Yeah. In today's climate, it is pretty like it's pretty relevant. And like the whole reason they did like nonsensical answers was to like show people like, yeah, the whole point of the nonsensical answer is just be like no one really knows. Like the whole idea of knowing is to say that there is also not knowing, and to say that there is you can't have life without death. And essentially introducing the idea like that there is duality in the world if you accept the duality of the world. One of like the famous sayings that they said was I think it was why annihilate what does not need annihilation. So essentially, why give form to something that doesn't need form? Because all we do as humans is give form to things. You know what I mean? And it was a very interesting take, because they say like to give, essentially, don't give anything form. Don't give anything like a special interest. Don't give it a ranking system, a classification.
Just kind of let things
be. Just let it be spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
Let it, like, there is no right or wrong answer. It's whatever your mind comes up with. They had a very like forthright trust relationship with their mind, which is also a very interesting juxtaposition with that Western philosophy, where Western philosophy is centered around ordering and structuring the chaos of our mind, and saying the mind can't give a good answer because it's so chaotic.
Right.
And they're kind of saying the opposite. They're like, no, that is nature. That is the world. Be a part of the world. Let the world, let your mind just be free. Let it say whatever it's going to say. What do you think about that?
I think it's interesting. I think it's important to not put labels on everything. You know, sometimes things just are what they are.
Yeah.
And like the more analysis we give them, the more we distort like the actual intent behind things. So, yeah, Zen masters, weird stuff,
dude.
Strange. I guess they had good points behind like what they did, but like very strange.
Yeah. Every time, I felt like every 10, 15 pages, I just kept getting another like revelation. I was like, wait, what the fuck? Like I would be. It almost seemed like they were like countering themselves, like every 15 pages, because like they were talking about the Mahayana Buddhism, which I'm so sorry for pronunciations.
That is the greater vessel Buddhism, as opposed to Hinayana, which means lesser vehicle. That whole Mahayana thing is real bullshit, because it's pretty much like Mahayana Buddhism is like more focused on like compassion.
Yes.
But like the name Mahayana is like, suck it, Hinayana.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Exactly. Like it kind of, I felt like Buddhism, and he even like mentions it in the book, like Buddhism contradicts itself in so many different veins, because it goes like nirvana is the escape of samsara, of this constant cycle of life and death.
Sure.
But then it's also saying like it's putting an abstraction on the cycle of life and death. It's saying it is samsara, and then it is saying that you should try and escape this life and death by achieving nirvana. And the only way to achieve nirvana is to completely let go of the cycle of life and death.
Right.
But to let go of something, you have to acknowledge that it is first there and in your hand.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of a paradox.
Yeah,
that way.
And so like that's kind of like, at least the early Buddhism, that was a really big problem that they were having, was that paradox of like grasping and then letting go of something that that shouldn't have been there.
Yeah, it's weird. It does seem like very like contradictory. Like a lot of Zen stuff you read. Mm-hmm. I think you get the point the same way. Oh, thank you. I think it's no, I'm good. What is that? No, it's fine. I'm about to go to bed. like I don't think Zen teachings always make sense in the logical way that we're like used to thinking of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the truth I think still comes through.
Yeah.
Like the message is still conveyed even though the words like aren't conveying them in a conventional way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it kind of just goes back to that whole it being such a juxtaposition of thought processes.
Right.
Where it's like we're thinking in terms of matter, we're thinking in terms of kilograms and so on and so forth. They're just thinking like this is life. There is no further need to detail it and to break it down and to classify it any farther. This is how life is. This is how it's always been. Mm-hmm. And man, I kind of lost my train of thought on that one.
Well, I think a big difference between like Western and Eastern thought on things is like the duality aspect, where like Western things usually have like good versus evil. Yeah. It's very like black and white.
Yes.
But then, I don't know about all Eastern like thought, but in Zen, it's more like they acknowledge like both sides, with like the yin yang thing.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, they're like, two sides of the same coin. And so it's impossible to like acknowledge one aspect of one thing without like representing the same like opposite aspect.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's less about like the separation of things and more about how everything is like interconnected.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How everything is, you literally, you can't have one without the other. Mm-hmm. And I think it was still interesting to see and hear Alan Watts' take on it, because he still didn't think that like Zen was necessarily like a religious practice that could be extrapolated to a large population that everyone could partake in, but rather a state of being, a state of mind that would in the end be beneficial for everyone involved in that person's life. So, it would benefit the person who is practicing the way of Zen, but would be beneficial for his parents or her parents, family, relatives, so on and so forth. And it was it was interesting to see that, because I mean, when you look at Western like Christianity, if you look at it from like a philosophical view, one could make the suggestion that Christ, his state of being in that where nothing really affected him, everything was the will of God, everything was the will of the world, so to speak, and that life was life, and that you deal with it not by getting angry at it, but by trying to understand it. And I felt like that was similar teachings to kind of like what they were saying with Zen. It's like you don't get mad at life. You don't get mad that one bamboo tree is shorter than the other. It is simply the way of life. And I was like, it was still, even though there's such a large divergence in the two thought processes or processes, whatever, it was interesting to see that they still kind of came back to that mode of being that would make life better for all involved. Is kind of what I took away from it.
Okay.
But yeah, I didn't know if you had any thought process on that or any input.
I hadn't really thought of it that way before.
Yeah.
So don't have a ton of input.
Hey, I understand. Hey, that's what this is for. I'm really enjoying just talking and like just learning different viewpoints, and kind of putting, because you can make logical fallacies and logical jumps when you don't talk it out.
Sure.
Because I'll be sitting there in the car thinking about stuff. And then I get out of the car and I start talking to friends about it. And then I'm like, wait a minute.
Reality check.
Yeah, I'm like, wait a minute. That's like a couple $100. And I'm like, I can't go to the mountains anymore.
Right.
So I'm just enjoying spitballing ideas and stuff too. But what did you say? So you said the Mahayana was the greater vehicle?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the specifics because like it came after like Theravada Buddhism, or like one of the first
The Pali
Buddhisms.
Kanon. I don't know. I just
Don't know.
I just had that one on my notes, the Pali Kanon, and I think what that one was really just like, essentially, what it was saying was that the path to enlightenment is supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be, an individual walk where strict meditation, so on and so forth. That is how you achieve this enlightenment. And then with Mahayana, it was more laid out, kind of like, so that way it was more mainstreamed. I felt like from what it kind of described in the book, it made it seem like the original way that Buddhism came into being, or that the Buddha got enlightened, was too difficult for the mainstream population. So Mahayana came around to kind of appease everybody and to say, hey, sometimes all you have to do to get enlightened is to say I'm not even going to try to say the name.
Like a sutra recitation.
Ava Sutra or something. Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know. it's similar to the Catholic praying the rosary, I felt like, where they
more religious maybe. More like ceremony involved.
It was kind of like, I will be saved by my actions.
Interesting.
And not necessarily, because I feel like with Buddhism, the principle is you don't need to be saved because you are the Buddha. Everyone has that Buddha nature in them.
They're already the Buddha.
They are already the Buddha. Exactly.
Right.
And that's another huge juxtaposition with like Western Christianity, where it's you have divinity in you because you're made in God's image, but at the same time you need to be saved by an external,
something separate from you.
Something separate from you.
That's the duality, and the oneness. In the Eastern versus like Western thought.
Yeah. Oh.
Got him.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Coming back.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because like Western thought is we're separate. We're torn. We're torn apart from the divinity.
Man separate from God.
Yes, we're not divine creatures in and of ourselves. Wow, that's very. Wow, I did not think of that.
Mind blown.
I keep hitting the boomstick. I keep getting scared.
I think Zen's cool because it's like a return to like the like original like whoever the original Buddha was. It's more like, it's about the sitting, it's about the zazen rather than the like ceremony.
Ooh, the zazen.
The zazen.
We have a picture of the zazen.
Here we go. I was actually just doing some zazen in my room.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've been doing zazen for like 2 years now.
Dang.
Almost every day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's honestly, that's some discipline right there.
Some serious Zen experience here.
We have a true Zen master in the house. Did not realize I was talking to such a true affiliate of the cause.
Now you know.
Okay.
How does it feel?
I feel enlightened. I feel just blessed, honestly.
Yeah, that was quick.
Yeah. Dude, they said it was instant. And they said that, enlightenment doesn't happen in small things, but rather a complete turn from within.
For the worst.
Yeah.
Have you guys talked about like the different sects within like Zen?
No, I don't think so.
Does he mention that in the book? Okay, because I only remember two:
Rinzai
and Soto.
Yeah, they're both Japanese.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. The Rinzai is where they have like the rigorous sitting for like hours at a time. I think he said at one point, sometimes in the year, they'll sit from like 3:30 a.m. to like 10 p.m.
Wow.
Just straight up sit and meditate.
Brutal.
Yeah, real brutal. And
hard on the knees.
No doubt.
My left knee is feeling it. I need to do something different.
Yeah. How long do you meditate for, man?
I used to be longer. Now I'm doing like 17 minutes at a time.
Okay.
Not bad. Usually when I feel my legs get numb,
it's
like probably time to stop.
You don't mind or matter that? Like that's just an abstraction, dude.
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes there's doable pain and there's like this is gonna fuck up my knee pain. I'm an old man already.
I feel you.
But yeah, Rinzai. So I think from what I remember, the main difference between Rinzai and Soto is that like Rinzai view enlightenment as like something to be attained, and it happens like instantly. Whether like in Soto, it's more gradual, but they believe like you're already enlightened. Like so, it's more in the like while you're sitting, you're exhibiting your Buddha nature, and that's not like you're building towards something. It's that you're, when you're sitting, you're already enlightened, and then so it's more like it's already there.
Yeah.
Right.
I gotcha. It's kind of like being enlightened is kind of just like being at peace almost, and then being in motion when you're at, or and then happy, and then while you're in motion, you'll be, and that's for the Soto, you said, or is that for the?
Yeah, like
'Cause
they emphasize more of like a gradual change.
Yeah.
But it's
See, and that's
the way they look at enlightenment is different.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, because the
Renzai.
Yeah, that one makes more sense to me because I mean, like enlightenment, you get the light bulb,
Right, it's like immediate.
It's an immediate thing,
Mhm.
and I think that's the way all enlightenment really is, because you kind of come to that point where you're like, oh, it was such an obvious thing. I should have been doing this the whole time.
Right, but I guess that's more of like a Western definition of enlightenment. It's like kind of like the Western definition of like meditation is like just meditation means like thinking.
Yeah.
But like in at least like the Zen term and generally like the Buddhist term, it's more like it's kind of like stopping unnecessary thoughts.
Yeah, the cessation of the turnings of the mind or something like that.
Yeah, because only when like it comes back to like that spontaneity thing.
Yeah.
Like when only like your raw mind is like being able to be exhibited is like when your Buddha nature is really like coming through.
Yes.
But like the meditations or like the thoughts that like kind of like control our minds for us is kind of like when we're lost and we're not exhibiting like Buddha nature.
Gotcha. So you kind of like use that meditation period to kind of flush your mind of all the stuff from like past days, things that you might still be carrying around to like.
Yeah, you're kind of trying to like slow down your mind.
Okay.
Or where like you're being like more vigilant of how your mind is acting, because a lot of the time it's not like we choose what to think about. Thoughts just like put themselves in our head.
Yeah.
And it's taking time to like realize how that happens, and like you get to understand like the way your mind works a little. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Because the whole process is trying to do nothing.
Yeah.
So that you can observe like your subconscious working things out.
Yeah.
But normally, in the way that we're like actively doing things, it's like ego based.
Yes.
And so, whether it's actually conscious or not, we like view it as conscious action.
Yeah.
What was that?
We have
10 more minutes.
10 more minutes.
Oh man.
Yeah. 10 more minutes. But yeah. So that's really, really interesting because like they did talk about that's why you meditate, so that way you are completely spontaneous and kind of able to quiet your mind of all the distractions of the world, which was interesting. And then kind of going back to the whole like the duality of everything, like they were the Zen masters, at least some of them back in the day, were like, you're meditating to become the Buddha. You're meditating to become the sitting Buddha.
Right.
Because, Zen is movement. It's just like there is nothing to strive for. There is no like the meditation is useful, but shouldn't be the striven for. The means to an end. It's a means to an end. It's not the means to an end. It's like it could be used to be helped and things like that. But it seemed because this is gonna be a little bit of a history lesson from the book. In the book they talked about like they started out in very, very small groups, and the idea of the spontaneous one-on-one teaching could still work. Like the master and the disciple you could still have that one-on-one because it wasn't so popular. And then
it was more personal.
It was more personal. And then as the popularity of Zen Buddhism and Buddhism in general got more and more just universal, the classes got larger and larger. And then because it was such a popular thing, it moved away from the everyday man trying to find his way in life to the pompous elite sending their kids to these Zen monasteries or just monasteries in general to get direction. And so these monks ended up realizing, well, we have a bunch of directionless kids who have been, spoiled their whole lives. They don't know what to do. So that's when they started to instill these very long, rigorous 5-hour meditation periods, if not longer, to break them pretty much
into like a summer camp.
Yeah, or like boarding school or something like that, and essentially to give the kids discipline. And I thought that was interesting because it talks about how like you're supposed to be just spontaneous, just be movement, free flowing almost, but there is still the need to at least have the capacity to get things done, to at least have the capacity to be able to sit down and focus on the task at hand, even if that may not be the end game goal of the practice itself. Which I was like, it was interesting because there was a distinct flip, like switch too, from this being a individual type thing to it being institutionalized. And I think it was
kind of loses the like flavor.
Yeah. With there was a quote in the book like with I forget something. It just like lowers with higher quantity lowers the quality or something like that. Okay. Essentially just saying the more of one thing, the less quality it is. And that's pretty much what happened because it became like a social status structure, which essentially like it's weird because like in the book it talks about not going into a nihilistic point of view, but I feel like it's still pretty difficult. At least the raw emotions coming off of that book, it's hard not to find a nihilistic end sometime to it.
What do you mean? Like, do you have an example from the book? Or?
So like the whole like the meditating or striving to let go of something that in the motion or action of striving to let it go acknowledges that you're still holding on to it and therefore acknowledging like the futility of the situation you're in. And it was odd. That at least that was mainly like what I was getting with like regular Buddhism. Was Zen, it was more optimistic in the sense that it's like just let it. I want to sound like Frozen, but just like let it go. Like let it go. I don't know. It was an interesting.
Yeah, there is like a sense of like almost like denial, I guess.
Yeah.
Or like in order to like not suffer, you kind of have to. It's not really ignoring your pain, but it's more like acknowledging that there will always be pain.
Yeah.
And I think you can take that attitude while still like changing your situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it does sound a little like you're trying to like avoid the problem in the way it's worded, but I think like I don't know, like if you're more like experienced in like the literature, it comes off more as just like avoiding or not needing to feel like the pain that's unnecessary.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of just change your mindset.
Yeah.
And change the perspective because what's causing the suffering is the grasping.
Sure. Right. It's like our what we wish things would be.
Yeah,
rather
exactly.
than just accepting like how they are.
Yeah, and being thankful for what you get. And yeah, I would agree with that. It was yeah, it was just like, especially with early Buddhism, it just seemed like it was very contradictory in that sense.
Yeah.
But
it's weird. Like a lot of Zen writings like come off that way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Which I maybe that's like they're trying to do that in order to kind of get you to realize, oh, there is no right or wrong. It's kind of just like there's a middle path that you have to walk, and it's your own middle path. It's your individual path,
right?
That you kind of find for yourself. That's because only you have the spontaneous actions of yourself. Essentially, like the greatest asset you have is your mind, because it's so individually yours. I was like, pretty. Kind of going back to that, the divinity of yourself, the Buddha inside yourself.
Right.
So.
And we're back with the Zen Hour.
And we're back. Zach, thank you for coming in.
Oh no, thank you.
After the last break.
Cheers.
And
yeah, if it if it sounds like I'm having a nervous breakdown and shaking, it's because I'm a little cold.
I was
I'm
actually
not insecure about my knowledge.
I was actually getting a little bit hot.
Oh really? Yeah, you look a little hot.
Yeah, I turned the AC down from 70 to 69.
Oh, did you?
Uh-huh.
That's the magic number.
That's what we usually keep it on.
Do we? Did we decide on this as a household?
That's what I usually keep it on. Anyways, listening to you and Harrison talk was really nice. And it made me realize some things, and it made me want to get into personally what your readings of Zen and what Zen has done in your life.
Sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's get into it.
Okay. So for me, I touched on this a little bit with Harrison in and outside of the podcast, but there were a couple things about the book, and this is the only Zen text, I guess if you want to call it that I've read.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a very broad knowledge base of it, but there were a couple things in that just sort of struck a chord with me. And one of them was at the very beginning of the book, Alan Watts is talking about how he's sort of talking about the, I guess, striking difference in Christianity and sort of Eastern thought. And
Okay.
He is going over how God is set up as a moral absolute in Christianity, and how through let's take a Christian throughout that Christian's life, they will either learn to accept the moral absolute, or something will happen that goes in conflict against that absolute. And so then they're presented with the dilemma of accepting the absolute as truly being absolute, and denying the thing that came into dilemma with it, or realizing that absolute was false and moving on to something different.
Okay.
And the example he gave, I don't remember exactly, but he set it up in a way to where it was the person themselves who was at odds with God. And so the person was then either forced to reject themselves or reject God as the absolute that they have been given.
Okay.
And he clearly can't reject himself, so he therefore rejects God.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So does he like connect that to Zen in some way, or?
Not necessarily. It was just a commentary on Christianity, I guess, that he had.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess that makes sense. You know, there's a very strict like moral definition in the Bible, right? And I guess if like you have like personal beliefs that contradict with that, it makes it hard to like agree with the whole, you know, the thing as a whole.
Yeah. Because it at least it's demands of its audience that it is taken as a whole.
Right.
And not split up into pieces.
Yeah. I mean, people still do it.
They do.
800 denominations of Christianity. They're like, well, we just don't like this part. So, you know, yeah, it's a little different.
But
we actually hate the military. So,
yeah.
So that's making our way into our Bible.
And I'm not exactly sure why that stuck with me, but it did, because I had never heard God set up in that fashion.
It's like a moral absolute.
Well, obviously he's a moral absolute, but sure. I had never heard him called that. Yeah, and I had never heard the I guess the possibility of your being going at odds with that, and then having to be forced to reject one or the other. And obviously in that moment you're going through a lot of cognitive dissonance because your identity is being challenged.
Yeah.
And it's a lot harder to deny yourself than it is to deny a structure that you've been presented with.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree.
Also, the whole idea of everything, all of our ways of communicating, all of our words, all of our even thoughts, because we think in words pretty much. Are we thinking ideas? We thinking symbols are all forms of abstractions that don't perfectly represent reality. That's another big takeaway for me, at least, from Zen and the book.
That the way we conceptualize things removes us from the actual thing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Bazinga.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty, that's a pretty good way to look at things. That are like, the ways we categorize things affect our perception on it.
Mm-hmm.
So everything in a way becomes blurred. There's no like objective like subject object relationship.
Yeah, but to function together, for humans to be in groups and cooperate, to work together, to communicate, we're forced to abstract.
Mm-hmm.
We're forced to categorize things just to have society function.
Yeah, I mean, it creates like a whole other realm of thought that's impossible without the I don't know, placement words.
Yeah.
All like philosophical like ideals, kind of hard to communicate unless you have like words that people acknowledge mean the same thing.
And the only reason they work is because everybody agrees to the same rules, to the same terms of play.
Sure.
We all agree, generally what a tree means. We all agree generally how to organize our subjects and verbs. And I'm speaking obviously in terms of English speakers. But that's the only way that these things are going to work, is if we all, and the same way with just living in society, we all agree on rules of, I guess, how to act, rules of politeness.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think when talking about like Western, Eastern philosophies, it can be interesting, like the words like that are used, because a lot of the times like the Western definition of a word is different than like an Eastern definition, like meditation or like enlightenment
or even mind. You talked about that. Like
Sure.
Mind in Western means something very different than mind in Eastern.
Hmm.
And for me, I used to be a stickler for semantics. Like I would nitpick what people say, especially in like debates and arguments and stuff. I would just like tear down an argument just because they said or they misused one word,
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of backed away from that after reading the book, because I realized that
You're not getting at the actual argument.
Well, I might not have been getting at the actual argument, but I was only able to be a stickler for semantics because I might have been going off a dictionary definition, or I might have been going off my general conception of how that word should be used.
Mm.
But
I guess that creates problems though when people make arguments, say like based on a certain word. Like one guy's talking about God, but the other guy's understanding of God is much different.
Mm-hmm.
So when one guy says one thing about him, like it can fly in the face of the other guy's like definition.
Yeah,
because they have different definitions.
And also, like I said before, the words we use aren't perfect representations of what we're talking about. They're just a generalized form that help us communicate a reality that's not being perfectly represented. And then that, even broader, made me think about made me consider the possibility that all of the systems we go by aren't necessarily based in nature, but are based in reality, to say.
More like
but are
socially constructed.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's a social construct. If you haven't heard from your everyday sociology professor.
Yeah. Maybe not to go that far, but
I don't know. That's true. Gender is not true, not real. Yeah.
Anyways.
Oh, what do you think about Trump? Inevitable.
Save that for a different podcast.
Orange elephant in the room. That's fine. Yeah, Zazen.
So yeah, with you, has Zazen been a big
bringing it home?
Mm-hmm.
What were you saying?
Has Zazen been a big influence?
So I think Zen is interesting because it's like, I guess you can take the broader like Buddhism is interesting because it's very a-religious, although like it's very like it has a lot of the same characteristics as like every religion, you know, with like ceremonies, and they do a lot of bowing. Like, what the fuck does that mean? But Zen's weird, or Buddhism's weird because it's like because you can still like say you could do zazen every day, but like it doesn't conflict with any like religious ideologies inherently.
Yeah, so I would think that like Zen or certain sects of Zen might promote doing zazen every day. And I think that that's analogous to Christianity wanting you to pray or read your Bible every day.
Sure.
Or for other religions wanting you to do this or that, like let's go back to Greek mythology, wanting you to visit a temple or make sacrifices or whatever. But I think that for those other examples, like for Christianity, for example, I'll use that because that's what I know the most. It wanting you to pray or read the Bible more is a way to get you in a cycle of associating yourself more with that ideology and with that belief.
Sure.
To where you're just it's sort of gonna snowball you to where the more you do it, the more you think about it, the more you believe it, the more you're gonna do it again, the more you're gonna think about it, the more you're gonna believe it. And it's different than doing zazen, because zazen isn't wanting you to think about a certain thing. It's not wanting you to necessarily even do a certain thing. It's just wanting you to it's wanting you to not think about anything. It's wanting you to not subscribe to anything.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, they're very, antithetical in that way. Where like most religions emphasize like conscious thought, but like in zazen it's like you can have like your approach to doing zazen should be very minimal in like how you think about it. Like a lot of like Zen books I read, it's more like you just do it. It's like how like certain routines you get into are very beneficial for you, but you need to put a lot of thought into them, like going to the gym, making breakfast. These are just things you do automatically. Yeah. But if you get into a habit of doing them automatically, then like there'll be long-term benefits. And it's more focused on the action of like doing and like seeing a direct outcome rather than just like, yeah, like you said, like subscribing to like an ideology or like reinforcing those ideas in your head over time.
That's good. I was missing that word, reinforcing. That's exactly what it does, is it reinforces your beliefs, right, which in turn make you do those things more, because your beliefs drive your actions. And then your actions reinforce your beliefs, which drive your actions, and you just completely get sucked into whatever that ideology is. Same thing with like I don't know if it's exactly the same thing, but similar, I think, to political ideologies and political vacuums, especially with the internet and social media and YouTube, is people get trapped in echo chambers, and they consume media from the same
like biased side.
Yes,
right,
all the time.
So they never
and then the algorithms are made to give them more of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, they never see any
opposing
viewpoints.
It's pretty weird too, because like you flip on the news to like Fox or something, and it's talking about one subject. Flip over to CNN, same subject, but the point of view is different. So I mean that brings us home to the whole ideas representing facts, and that like it can be manipulated.
Yeah, 100%. They. I'm sorry. I forgot what I was gonna say.
That's fine. Yeah, so I think zazen is really cool because it's more about doing something than just believing something. And I think the effects of that are less conscious and more directed towards your subconscious. And with just like staring at a wall for say like 20 minutes a day, it like helps your brain reset to a more like undisturbed, like natural state of mind. Or like say you're like really anxious about something and you just run it through your head over and over. Yeah. It doesn't really help most of the time. It's non-productive thought.
Right.
And it just like upsets you and like gets you more like tightened up and ultimately makes things worse. But like with Zazen, it's more about like mellowing you out and like helping you see things from a more objective point of view.
Okay, so a couple things. I've heard that for beginners, a good practice is to focus on your breath, focus on your breathing, count your breath, and really tune in to what's happening, what you can feel in your body as it's going in, coming out, and that helps you get into the rhythm of how your mind should be working while you're meditating or doing zazen or whatever. Now, taking that along with the Western idea of meditation to where I think you said this earlier with Harrison, it's just sort of thinking. And a lot of Westerners, they use meditation for a means to an end. They use it to get something, or they want to. They've been told that it can be beneficial, so they're trying to do it to gain something. So are you still in the point to where you're? You said you've been doing it for 2 years now. Are you still at the point where you're focusing on your breath? Are you using those sort of techniques? Are you actually thinking about stuff like is the Western idea of meditation, or what's actually going on in your mind when you're doing your zazen?
So I forget,
if anything.
Yeah, I forget I think it's Sanskrit. Like there's a lot of Sanskrit words in like Buddhism, but there's a term for like the things you do during meditation that like kind of help guide your practice. And I know there's one that a lot of people think is like the only right way to do it, where you don't try to do anything and you just let your mind do what it's going to do. And then a lot of people like counting the breath or like focusing on different parts of the breath. I think that stuff's all good. I think Zen is weird in a way because it like it makes you like with like a means to an end. Like you're obviously doing the Zazen to benefit your life. But I think the important part, which maybe isn't always emphasized, is you shouldn't be doing it with that in mind.
Right. Which was a big thing that Alan Watts talked about in the book, was that if you're doing any of these things, if you're doing zazen, if you're trying to remove yourself from abstractions, if you're seeking the spontaneous answers, then you're doing them to try to attain Buddha or try to attain some sort of benefit or enlightenment or something. And reaching for the point, doing something for the point, is missing the point entirely.
Exactly. I don't know if this was in the book. I mean, I have read The Way of Zen. It was like a while ago.
Yeah.
But there's like this old like Zen proverb, which is pretty well known. And like back in the day, you used to make mirrors by like rubbing like metal, I think like sheet metal or something like that, or like stones. So this was in the book. Yeah. It talks about like a tile. Yeah, like a tile. So one of the Zen boys is doing like zazen, and his Zen master is like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm trying to become a Buddha." And he's like, "Okay." And then he goes over and picks up a piece of tile and starts like rubbing it to like make a mirror. And the student is like, "What are you trying to do?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm trying to make a mirror." And he's like, "Yeah, well, you're rubbing a tile. Like, how do you think you're ever gonna make a mirror out of a tile?" And he's like, "How do you ever think you're gonna like make a Buddha out of yourself from doing zazen?" So, keeping the goal in mind while doing it kind of like sullies the practice and like makes it impure.
It defeats the purpose. It prevents you from reaping the true benefit of what it would be, I guess.
Yeah, because the goal is to target like your subconscious, and with that in mind, you're like consciously thinking about something, which is like you're not really doing zazen at that point.
Yeah, and sort of in that vein, I think Harrison mentioned this earlier, is that Zen masters would have these very elaborate questions, and they would ask their students, and their students might give an answer immediately. They might leave for a few hours, few days, think about it really hard, come back with an answer, and anything they said would just be wrong because they thought about it, because they sought out a specific conclusion.
They weren't giving their like spontaneous, like pure of mind, Buddha nature response.
Yeah, they sought out something that prevented them from seeing the actual the actual point of the question.
Yeah, I think those like weird Zen riddles are usually called like koans, and they're more popular in like the Rinzai tradition, because like they believe that like enlightenment comes like instantly, and so the questions are more like to jab at your like enlightenment like muscle to like just like spark it and to like realize. And It's weird because people talk about like these koans and they all have the same like correct answer, but people arrive at them on their own, and then they give the same answer. The Zen master's like, yeah, that's correct. Strange. It's weird. I don't know. So I mean, at least that points towards the possibility of like an actual objective mindset,
right?
Which is questionable, and which doesn't feel natural to like our Western like mindset.
Yeah, well, I would say our Western mindset is a lot more geared towards objective-based things. Like everything we do for a purpose. At least we don't have those times in the day where we're just sitting just to sit, which is what Zazen is supposed to be, right?
Right.
We are, if we're not doing anything, we're thinking, why am I not doing anything? I'm wasting time. I could be doing something right now.
Well, I think the point I was trying to make is that like in Western thought, we don't trust like our initial like unthought out response to things. Oh, okay. We don't trust like our irrational side of things.
Unless it's a multiple choice test, then you always go with the first answer.
Right. But like, I guess like the Zen mindset is that the irrational thinking mind, which is like the original mind, is universal in a sense.
Yeah,
speaks to a universal truth,
which is why they come to the same answers for
which
the Zen master questions.
Again, doesn't seem to make sense. But like, I don't know. I actually don't know. I'm still skeptical.
Yeah. So another thing that really struck me in the book was he had a chapter on Zen art, and I think in the beginning of the chapter he talks basic introduction into painting and the poetry. But really got me more so was the poetry. But we can take a look right here. This is one of the paintings, and he talked a lot about how the Zen art represented the Zen mindset, in that it wasn't very structured. It was just it was very natural movements of the brush, very spontaneous movements of the brush. It was ever came to the artist's mind at the time.
Okay. It came off as more natural.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And this was one of the examples he used in the book. So I don't know what you can take from that, but
it's a guy looking at some words.
I don't know if he's looking at the words necessarily.
His eyes are going up. Man, I forget that effect on CRTs.
Where
your hands.
Oh,
it's like you lose frames in your hand. It's like really weird.
All right. Well, can we get to the poems then? Because I don't really know much about the paintings either, but the poems I do know a little bit about.
Sweet. Fantastic.
Right. So this poem right here, me and Harrison, before we started this, searched a good while to find. It wasn't with the rest of the poems, but I'll read it out loud real quick. So, at dusk, the cock announces dawn. At midnight, the bright sun. And this is supposed to be representative of, again, the Zen mindset, the Zen principles. And when I was first reading through the book, I read this and it struck me, and I read it multiple times over. And I found myself trying to deliberate a meaning out of it, which obviously seems like it's counterintuitive to the point of Zen. But what do you think about it?
Yeah, it doesn't make any fucking sense.
You don't think so?
Well, I mean, if you think the sun's the moon and you're confused at night. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about it?
So I don't remember what my initial thoughts on it were, but I did elaborate out this very deep meaning for it, which I'm sure would have blown you all away.
You're impurifying this poem.
Yeah, I guess so, or at least my interpretation of the poem.
I do like it though.
Yeah, it's very something about it is kind of mesmerizing. But I think the point of it, so like Harrison was saying, with the Zen masters giving you whatever answers came to them, they didn't really have any meaning per se. Like they didn't necessarily directly relate to whatever questions they were asking or whatever they were doing at the time, or even whatever questions were asked to them. It was just sort of what got to them. And on top of that, the absence of dualism in Zen, I know Alan Watts gave the example of on so any dichotomy you can think of, good, evil, tall, short, whatever, light, dark, is two sides of a coin, the heads and the tails. Evil is the tails, heads is heads is good. And the only thing separating them is the middle of the quarter, and all that is the abstractions of those things. So they are essentially the same thing. So I think in the poem, at dusk the cock announces dawn, those are obviously two conflicting, two opposite things. At midnight, the bright sun, like you said, if you thought the moon was the sun at midnight, you'd be very confused. But I think what they're doing is trying to combine two things that would typically be put on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's definitely a recurring theme, like the purposeful, like antithetical statements in Zen. And I think it's good because it's trying to like deconstruct the way we put everything into like semantic boxes, or like, you know, with the koans, like they don't want a wordy answer that matches the question.
Yeah.
They want like a deeper, I don't know, Buddha mind answer, which doesn't necessarily have to connect back to like the words we would think is appropriate for the same words that we got in the question.
All right, let's get to the next one. And yeah, at least what I got from it was the combining, the removing of the middle of the coin, the removing of the abstractions of the two extremes, and the merging of them into the reality of them being the same thing, essentially. So this one, we'll actually take a break here before we read this next one.
Quick, a word from our sponsors, MeUndies and NVPN Nord. I wish we were being paid.
Hello. We are back.
Yeah, glad to see you here on the hot seat.
Absolutely. I loved being outside of the hot seat.
It's nice, isn't it? You can just relax and listen to the conversation.
Yeah, I can, and then I want to interject like every 4 minutes and say something. I was
thinking the same thing.
And then now that I'm back in the hot seat, I'm like forgetting all the questions and stuff that I had previously.
We need to get a third mic. I have another mic stand and more wire.
We need another mic for like the young Jamie character who's going to be off to the side.
Yeah, Zach.
Yeah.
Which I would like to say thank you, Zach, for coming out here.
As you could probably tell, Zach knows a thing or two about Zen. He's honestly, when he came out here, I had no idea he knew what he knew about Zen. And it threw me for a loop.
Yeah, he's read up a little bit.
Yeah, just a little. You didn't tell me you'd been.
I'm sorry.
Practicing Zen for 2 years.
I forgot to mention it.
Yeah, it's all good. I'm just
all
kidding.
Right, so
straight.
he went to bed though, so he's not going to be out.
He
here
did
anymore.
go to bed on his own spontaneous action. Because he decided to do that.
So let's dig into this last poem here.
Yes.
So do you want to read it?
Since you read last time, I think I shall read this time.
Go ahead.
The thief left it behind, the moon at the window.
All right. So initially, this isn't something that stuck out to me when I was reading. At least I don't think so. Like I said, it's been a while. But when we were back looking for that last poem, we saw this and it caught my eye. So I wanted to include it.
Yeah.
So I'll let you start. What do you think about this?
So the thief left it behind, the moon at the window. I'll be honest. I want to say the first thing that popped into my mind was the very deep thought that the moon at the window is the most beautiful thing in the house. That like even though everything you got that you thought you enjoyed and that you held dear to you was really just an ephemeral object that kind of loses meaning whenever it's gone, whenever it leaves your life. And that the real beautiful things in your life are the nature, or rather that it's the real beautiful things in life are nature and they can't be taken from you. They're almost inalienable
until you die,
or
until young Goku comes to Earth and blows up the moon.
Yeah, or Naruto decides to slice the moon in half.
Yeah,
because he's fighting Madara Uchiha for the Great Ninja Alliance. But
things can happen.
It happens, Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do.
But for me, this sounds very Socratic, which I mentioned this a little bit earlier. So in I don't know how to get to my point like I did earlier. So in Socratic thought, the idea is to remove yourself from things that you can't control, from aspects of life that are outside of your ability to, control.
Yeah.
And some of those things being material objects, which is why you shouldn't seek comfort and your, I guess, fulfillment and happiness in material things. And there was a story of this Socratic writer who, the Stoic writer, who was talking about, or he was asked, well, what would you do if somebody came in your house and stole your reading lamp, which was like lamps were important for those people. They didn't have electricity, and he said, I would buy a cheaper lamp. So that meaning he wouldn't be upset about the lamp being stolen. He wouldn't try and find the guy who stole the lamp. He wouldn't replace it with a better one and get better locks. He would replace it with a cheaper one, so he still has the functionality of having a lamp, but it's not going to matter as much if it's stolen again.
Yeah.
And I think that's very analogous to this poem, in that a thief comes in, they steal everything from the house, like you were saying. The guy wakes up and he doesn't care about all those things that are gone. He looks at the moon and he still finds comfort in that, because that's something that's there. He can't control that a thief broke in. That's in the past now.
Yeah.
That's gone. He couldn't control it anyway.
Yeah.
Because that's outside of his own deliberation.
Yeah.
But he still finds something to get comfort in.
Yeah.
And that's, the beauty of the moon shining through his window.
Absolutely.
Into his empty house.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, good gracious. Every time. No, absolutely. I would agree. Yeah. That makes perfect sense to me. I would agree with I think that it lines up with like the Zen teaching too, in that a lot of the suffering that it talks about is really self-contrived, meaning that like it's brought upon the person. It's brought upon the person not being happy with their state of being. And life isn't being discriminatory towards you. It's really just based on what connotation is attached to the event that happened in life. And well, I would just like to clarify. I think I said Socratic. Yeah.
When I was talking about that, I meant to say Stoic.
Yes.
We're talking about the Stoics here.
Yes.
Not Socrates' Socratic thought. The Stoic thought.
The Stoic thought. Gotcha. Marcus Aurelius type thought.
Sure.
Sure. I gotcha. Yeah. Ooh, pardon me. Excuse me. Yeah, I would just say, like, and also kind of getting back to what Zach was talking about when he was talking about Zen being a do it type of mentality. And I know I probably shouldn't have done this while I was reading, but every time I started to think about stuff, I just started thinking about things in like the Western way. So it's just like thinking about Zen being a philosophy in which you feel, you do, you act, and then you deal with the consequences.
Yeah.
I was just like, all right, that's Nike, just do it. Or like any real successful person in Western business is just like, do it. What are you afraid of? You're afraid of what? Failure? You're afraid of being afraid. And
so it seems to me that you were trying to place an abstraction or categorize something that was meant to take you away from abstractions and categories.
Exactly. I would agree with that wholeheartedly, but at the same time, I think it's very interesting to see that both of those things still line up to an extent. Like Buddhism and Zen it talks about not to strive for anything, but still needing to get things done. And it really caught me off guard, I guess, when it was just like,
yeah. So with the zazen, sitting just to sit.
Yeah. Oh,
from my understanding, they would literally just sit, not moving until they had to do something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They would sit there until they had to go make food. They would sit there until they had to go take care of the livestock. They would sit there until they physically had something to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that, I feel like, is what I was talking about in contrast to the Western thought is, even if we don't have anything to do, we're sitting there worrying. We're sitting there running our minds thinking, I'm wasting my time.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything. I could be being productive right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whereas
that's completely opposite to, the Zen way of thought, which is, I don't have anything to do, so that's what I'm going to do.
Nothing.
Yeah. I'm going to sit just to sit, not to think about something, not to read something, not to, watch a YouTube video or scroll through Instagram. I'm literally just going to sit.
Mm-hmm. And to just be in that state of mind. Yeah, it's yeah. What was I? Oh, dang on it. Oh,
shoot, dang, darn.
Shoot, doggone, darn. I hate it when I do stuff.
Dang,
like
shoot, dang, dag, flab it. All right.
Well,
I feel like I got us both off track. What were you
saying? It's all good. We were talking about what was your last part? What was your last point that you just made?
Sitting just to sit.
Sitting just to sit.
Well, so how about this? So me and Zach talked sort of about how Zen in general, for me specifically, that book has affected our life. So you just finished it, so you're fresh,
Yeah.
So how has it affected your thought thus far? And I guess if you want to be predictive, how do you think it'll?
Yeah. So.
And it does. I don't want to pressure you to come up with something that's like.
No. Yeah. Like
a revelation,
Yeah.
Just
broad changing.
Yeah. If you didn't care about it, so you didn't care about it.
No, I mean, like I liked it. It was interesting. Like I said, I had a hard time not drawing from previous Western ideologies, trying to like connect the dots really, because I've always liked that. I've always really liked trying to find common points between different things. Because I do kind of like what Zach was talking about. Like, I find it very interesting that these Zen masters all kind of came to the same random answers. And it kind of, to me, that I would look at that and that implies like a universal oneness in the world. Or that there is perhaps a universal state of being that is universally accepted as like the state of being to be in.
Yeah, which I wouldn't say that's too far off.
Yeah, right.
From what they're trying to get at, yeah.
Yeah. The thing is like it's very interesting because it's the same answer, but it's different people, which in turn changes the answer because everybody is going to get to the answer in a different way, and they're going to walk a different life that's going to have different experiences that's going to allow for different learning points from their experience. So essentially like don't diminish what anyone does simply because I think it's lesser than what I'm doing, for I'm just the measuring tool.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of going like what Einstein was saying, where it was like, if you measure a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's obviously going to be dumb. I think like kind of everyone has everyone impacts and supports the motion of society and culture, and they do it in such an immense way that it is only them who could do it in that way, and not me.
Mm-hmm.
And to say that I know what is right and what is wrong is just false. Like it's just there's no place in it. There's no place for me to say that type of stuff.
I would say that seemingly the point of Zen, the point of the awakening, is to see reality for what it actually is. To stop seeing reality through the lens of abstractions that we have invented.
Yeah.
And start seeing it just for what it is. And so if the awakening is an instant awakening, right? And the awakening is the understanding of the true reality, then that reality is not going to change. So if you come to these answers whenever you have your, what was it, Satori? Was that?
Yeah, Satori was the Japanese instant fulfillment.
Yeah.
Or instant enlightenment. Yeah.
So if you come to these answers at the same time that you come to your Satori, then that means that the answer is related to the true version of reality. So then it would make sense if all these people are actually coming to the realization and seeing reality for what it really is, that they would come to the same answers. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. And that really interests me. That's something I've always kind of been after. Is just is there a universal state of oneness or a universal state of being?
Well, you got to stop chasing after it.
Exactly. That's the annoying part about it. Is kind of getting back to I think when I was reading the book, I think that every time I got to the point where I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. And then it was like, oh, how do I practice that? Oh, I can't practice it?
Oh, it doesn't make sense anymore.
Oh yeah, it's like, okay, yeah. I've lost my train of thought. I'm so used to, you go to the gym, you put in work in the gym, you get the results. You eat food, you get calories, you get the results.
Yeah.
Everything is you do it and then you get it. With Zen, you don't do it,
and then you get it,
and then but you still have to do it. You still have to for the poetry or the art, especially the painting. It talks about how these people just practice for hours and hours and hours, but they practice simply to practice. They're not practicing to become masters of the artwork.
They're not practicing to get better.
Yeah, they're just practicing. They're not even practicing. They're just painting.
Exactly.
They're literally just painting to paint, not because they're
That's the same thing as sitting to sit.
Yeah.
They're not doing it as a means to an end. They're not doing it for a goal in mind. They're just doing it for the action itself. And I think that ties back into the idea of, I don't want to say living in the moment, because that's has some negative connotations.
Yeah.
But with the kind of lifestyle it brings, but it is living in the moment. It's accepting that.
So what it was also, sorry to cut you off,
no,
but I have a thought process that I kind of want to bring up. So it talks about that Zen's all about being spontaneous and being in almost this childlike state of mind of the letting your first emotion be the emotion you go with. But at the same time, it's also, if you spontaneously want to think, you spontaneously want to think. And so you can think spontaneously for 30, 40 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, 3 hours. The thing is you have to be spontaneous with it. And the thing is you have to be resolute in it as well. It's a main big thing with it, or that one of the parables of it was if you're going to walk. If you're going to sit. Do not do both. So essentially this is also me just trying to rationalize it.
And don't question it as well.
Yeah, don't question it as well. don't falter, don't wobble in between walking and sitting. Whole ass one thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Work on a thing wholeheartedly, get it done, and then rest wholeheartedly and relax for the job is done. I think that's kind of like the principle. It's like, do what needs to be done, and then when you are done, rest for that is what needs to be done.
Something else needs to be done.
No, what needs to be done is rest.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was that the idea of the totality Tolkien. Yeah, Tolkien. Yeah, J.R.R. Tolkien. Yeah.
George.
Now I'm thinking about Game of Thrones from George R.R. Martin.
Pretty similar guys.
Yeah, grandfather of fantasy versus the new grandfather of fantasy.
the young star of fantasy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
George was pretty old.
Yeah.
He's getting up there. He's probably not going to finish the series. He's probably going to.
It's a sad thought, man.
Yeah. It's a sad thought because you put a sad thought on it. And I'm just saying that's just life, dude. That's
taking a Zen approach, huh?
Yeah. He's old.
Wait,
well,
were you saying something?
I think I was, but I've lost it. I mean, to be completely honest, my brain's kind of at 3 a.m. I keep losing trains of thoughts pretty quickly on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But
well, we can end it here if you want to. If you're
trying to think, because we can edit this stuff out too, right?
No, we can't. I'm leaving it.
Yeah.
I'm leaving all of it.
All of it.
Yep.
It's all quality.
It's gonna be raw and uncut, except for the things at the beginning that we did that I'm gonna cut out.
True. Well, I guess that's that spontaneous nature of it. You know, you gotta be. See, that's the one thing that, going back to the question of like, how is this going to affect my life? I really don't know. Like, I would like to think I would be more spontaneous, but I just know my nature, which is to think about everything and then to think about it again and then perhaps think about it some more.
Yeah.
Just because I really I enjoy the process of thinking.
Do you see yourself, starting Zazen as a 2-year habit, or?
I mean, I could, yeah. I mean, I've tried meditation in the past.
I remember that.
Didn't really work out for me too well. I failed. But
maybe you were doing it with the wrong.
Yeah, the wrong mindset.
The wrong way, with the wrong mindset.
I think I definitely was, because I was kind of just going at it I was doing it to attain more self-discipline. I was doing it because I think self-discipline is a large part of living a fulfilled life, or at least
you were doing it for something, though.
Yeah, I was doing it for self-discipline.
Yeah, which according to Zen might not be the best way to go about it.
Yeah, if I'm doing something to be more disciplined, so that way I can do more things, perhaps I should just do the things I think I need to do.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so like I was meditating to help get stuff done. So instead of doing things that needed to be done, so it's like, oh, I'll meditate and it'll increase my self-discipline, so that way I can actually do my homework. And then it's time to come do my homework, and I've meditated for 15 minutes for the day, but shit, I still don't want to do my homework.
Yeah.
So it's it's kind of just you just got to do it. I think like Zen is a great like building block to kind of get like a structure on how to live life, but or at least to maybe live a productive life, maybe not how to live a life, but just a productive life. But like everything, you kind of got to meld it all together. I think Zen mixed in with other practices is the way to go. I think kind of what happens with like Buddhism, like you start out with the one grand structure and then it gets diluted down into a bunch of other smaller subsections. I think that they're right. And then it's like same thing happens with Christianity. It's like you have like the one whole, and then you have all the different smaller parts that everyone thinks that like the part is greater than the whole. It's like, no, the whole thing makes it.
Yeah,
and you have
maybe.
you have to have every like divinity is the harmony of all its pieces. And you can't do away with one thing. You have to keep it all together and to work everything else together with it. You got to be able to meld all the different emotions, all the different aspects of life.
Right. Maybe we can revisit this topic in the future and see if mine or yours, or even if Zach's around, his thoughts and practices of Zen have changed at all.
True. Fair.
Maybe we can read another Zen text and come back to it and see what's going on.
Yes.
But I would like to give a disclaimer before we end.
Yes.
That I think it's probably obvious, but we are not experts in Zen or
At all.
Alan Watts or the history of Asia or anything like that. And we don't want to come off as that.
I don't know. I think I'm the best Zen master in North America at the moment.
Yeah. I don't want to speak for Harrison, at least for myself.
I definitely, actually, I'm going to go on record and say that I'm the best there ever was to practice Zen.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Harrison's the best. So if you need any Zen-related advice, just come to him.
My number is
704.
Not going to happen.
That's if you type in "not gonna happen" just with the letters that used to be on the keypad, you'll get his number.
Yeah, like the old Razor flip phones.
Exactly. All right, let's
end it there.
let's end it. All right. Thank you, Zach, for coming out here and joining us. Thank you, Harrison.
Yes.
For coming.
Thank you, Seth, for hosting.
Joining us. Yeah, of course. Of course, man. Yeah, but don't. This was more supposed to be for a way.
To get our thoughts out,
an outlet for us to have a conversation, to get our thoughts out about the stuff that we're consuming, the stuff that we're reading, listening to, watching, whatever. And this just happened to be the first thing. So again,
so if it sounds like we're rambling and grasping for a topic, it's probably because I'm rambling and grasping for a topic, and I'm trying to find the words to say. But I just enjoy talking, and I enjoy kind of getting my thoughts in order and trying to just, I learned so much from talking to Seth, and Zach, I had no idea the man had been practicing Zen for 2 years. So you kind of just, you learn something new every day. And I really enjoy this little podcast, little setup we got going, because it's, might as well do something while conversating.
Hopefully we can keep doing it. That's the plan, at least.
Yeah.
So again, this is our first time, so if we seem a little nervous, that's also why.
I'm not nervous at all.
Harrison's also the best podcaster in the world, along with the best Zazen practicer.
Pretty sure, yeah. Well, no, I think I'm also I'm definitely the best Smash Bros player.
All right, Brady Ennis, you heard that call.
Yeah, Brady Ennis, come at me, bud.
Brady Ennis.
Come at me, Brady Ennis. But, yeah.
All right, let's end it here.
Let's call it a day. Thank you.